this portion of our presentation. So what we're going to be looking at is English language development. And if you remember from part 1 last week, we looked at ELD and we looked at mathematics. And one thing we did is look at a florist task. And just to remind you of what that task looked like, we watched a bad math lesson and it was really short. And the teacher basically got up there and said, read this task to the students, had the students read it and then read this task. The florist can order roses in bunches of 1 dozen and lilies in bunches of 8. Last month, she ordered the same number of roses as lilies. If she ordered no more than 100 roses, how many bunches of each could she have ordered? What is the smallest number of bunches of each that she could have ordered? Explain your reasoning. And then the math teacher said, go and solve this problem, spend some time on your own, then we'll come back together. And the teacher posted answers so you could check your own work and then moved right along. And we talked about that's a really bad way to approach this math lesson because it doesn't do anything to help our emergent bilingual students or students just in general to unpack what this task is asking. So what we did is looked at how we look at input of language through mathematics. And if you remember, there were 2 aspects of input that we focused on, and then 2 aspects of output. And we kind of thought about in a math lesson, where would you put these things? Where would you put the input? Where would you put the output? And we know with lesson plans, it always starts with the launch, then we have a body, and then we have a concluding part of a lesson. So you all went in groups and talked about how you could infuse this lesson to make it better, to beef it up, and think about how we could make it better, not only for our emergent bilingual students, but just for all students in the classroom. So you formed expert groups, and those expert groups are going to meet today and share their findings. And we're going to do this in our Mighty math groups. So here are the procedures. We're going to go to our Mighty math group one more time. I've combined one of the groups. So room 1 will be group 1, room 2, group 2, room 3, group 3, room 4 will be groups 4 and 5. There'll be a little bit of overlap. I think 2 of you will have the same presentation, so you can kind of present together a little bit. I know I changed this up on you at the last minute, but we had some conflicts where people couldn't be here today. So I wanted to make sure that everybody could get the information. So I put those 2 groups together. Group 6 is going to meet in room 5, and group 7, you're going to meet in room 6. And if you are in group 8, you are going to stay here in this room with me in the main room. And we are going to present in order of our expert groups. So we're going to have expert group A present first, then we'll go to B, then we'll go to C, and then we'll go to D. You'll have about 3 minutes. You can talk a little bit if there's any questions from the group in between. And then when we come back, I'll probably give a full 20 minutes for this presentation. So there's plenty of time for you to kind of talk about it. There should be about 3 to 5 minutes per presentation. If there's 4 presentations, that takes us 20 minutes. So I'll probably do a little bit more than that. And then I'm going to call you back and I'm going to ask you to put in the chat what is an important thing you plan to do in your math lesson to help your emergent bilinguals be powerful in math. So that's a question prompt I want each of you to keep in the back of your mind as you're listening to these presentations. Might be something that you presented, might be something you've heard from another expert group that you want to share, but we're going to look at the chat and kind of decide how that might help us out. Any questions that we have about this before I create the rooms? Sarah, I see your hand up.
Yes. So the groups, you're going to put us in groups for 20 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm setting a timer just to keep our group on track.
I love that. Great. I will probably put you in groups for 20 to 25 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute callback. I want at least each presenter to have 5 minutes total. So leave a minute or so for questions or discussion, but anywhere from about about 5 minutes each presenter. And some groups only have 3, so you will have a little more time for discussion. Great question, Sarah. Any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go ahead and create the groups here. Okay, the rooms are now open, so feel free to go to the rooms that you need. You can also just go ahead and stay in here if you're in that final group, group 8. Okay. I think we have just about everybody. There's somebody in here that maybe should be in a different group.
Yeah, I don't remember which room I'm supposed to be in.
No worries. Allie, are you in group 7? Do you
I'm in
remember?
group 5.
You're in group 5.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, I think I'm supposed to be in room 4.
there you go.
Okay, thank
Just
you.
sent you right off. You are welcome. Okay. And now there are 4. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of be a fly on the wall here and let you all present. So I'm going to mute myself and we'll have presenter that for the expert group A, go ahead and set up and go first.
Okay, I'm expert group A, so let me go ahead and pull up my screen. Alrighty. So for our presentation, our like whole thing was about context, decoding the context, and enriching the context of the problem. So the florist task. So the first one was to understand the content. So the problem tells the student that the florist is ordering the roses in bunches of dozens and lilies in bunches of 8. But some students might not understand what bunches are, or they might not understand what a dozen are. So in the little text bubbles, you can see like it says like in the text, it says roses can be purchased in dozens, but what else can be purchased? And then the other student asks that they don't know what dozen means either, but maybe it equals like a specific number. So that's a conversation that they're having. So as the teacher, we would define, be like, oh, a dozen means they're buying it in 12s. And bunches just means that they're in a little stack all together. And it's a bunch of 12 roses that they're buying. So let's go ahead and go through the next one. So again, we just put visuals as well. So a bunch of 8 lilies would look like this. And you can go ahead and count the lilies with them just so that they have a visual as well of what that would look like. And we also have a bunch of dozen roses. And again, a visual of 12 roses so they can visualize that a dozen equals 12 roses. Okay, so then we go to understanding the math. So some concepts, again, a dozen roses equals 12 roses. And we have some just questions that we as we were working through the problem, we're like, okay, what is this problem asking us to understand? And so the problem is asking for the smallest number of bunches that the florist can buy. So it's asking us for the lowest common factor between 8 and 12. And so then again, we define what common factors are, and factors are, a factor is a shared or joint between 2 or more numbers. And again, we have those little text bubbles of just conversations that could potentially happen between students. And it just reflects what is on the bottom. So again, on these text bubbles right here, it says, I don't know what a dozen is. And the other student is like, maybe it equals a specific number. And over here, the little text bubble says, the text asks us to find the smallest number of bunches of each, but I don't know what that means. And so the other student is like, I don't know either. Maybe we could try the lowest common factor. And so those are just conversations that our group were like, oh, maybe our students would have these. Then we have the make a plan. So this, I think, would really help emergent bilingual students, like having just like even like sequential steps for them to follow and like having a plan for how they're going to approach this problem, right? So in this little text bubble over here, it says like, I think my first step would be to find out how many bunches we need to get to 100 roses. So finding the maximum amount they can buy, knowing that roses come in 12. So how many how many bunches of roses can they buy that will get to 100? And then the other was like, oh, that makes sense. And you could also try and find common factors. Um, so sorry, yeah. And then the other one over here says like, I think we could also list the factors of 8 and 12. So that gets them thinking about like, what's the lowest factor that these two numbers have in common and what's the highest factor? And that would help them figure out what's the lowest amount and what's the highest amount of bunches of roses and lilies that they can buy. And I think that's all of it. Yeah, that is the presentation. There we go. Do you guys have questions or comments?
I think you did a great job of going more into detail.
Mm.
Like just the detail you guys added really adds so much to this problem and gets them working together. So good job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think as I'm like starting to plan for math, I found it, and like even just the interactions that I've had like in math small groups with students, like I specifically work with like my emerging EL students, so they still don't have like a lot of like knowledge of the English language, and so having like those sequential steps and having a plan on how to approach the problem really helps them, and like defining and be like, oh, like this word means this, and like we could find like a cognate, and they're like, oh yeah, like I could connect it this way, you know. That's really helped them. So like identifying the language, because I think it's something that like we as like, because we know the language, we don't think about it. We're like, oh, a dozen equals 12. Like that's just, you know, but that's like to an emergent bilingual, they're like, what the heck does a dozen mean? So like identifying that language, defining it, finding even like coming up with like movements so that they can like connect the word to like a movement and making a plan has really helped them. And I'm sure it'll continue to help them.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's great.
Mm.
I love that. I mean, and even with especially our younger students too, having things defined up there. So it's like if they're just stuck and they forget something and they're too embarrassed to ask or anything, like it's up there and they know how to like refer to it. And then it's like, oh, okay, I remember. And now they can get the ball rolling again. So definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Great way
Yeah.
to start us off there. I know we're a bigger group, right? Because we have 4 presentations. So do we have our expert group B ready to present here?
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay, so I was expert group B and ours was about language demands. So analyzing the linguistic demands and develop vocabulary. Okay, so the florist task. So when reading this, I think that our English language learners would have trouble with vocabulary. So as a group, we kind of chose the words in here that like maybe for them kind of would like be difficult to understand. So like bunches, we highlighted, dozen, and then no more than was like a kind of like a sentence that we thought like maybe they wouldn't understand. So during our lesson, we would break those words down before beginning and like making sure that they understand like a bunches is a group of the same object. So then they'd have like, they'd see the image of a bunch of something. And for example, here it's flowers. So that kind of gets them thinking of the florist task. Then for dozen, it's a group of 12 items. So then we showed them like a group of 12 roses. And then no more than, it's something that has to be less than the number given. So for this task to make sure our English learners are like experts at these words, we think that we should give them like a task like for step 1, like draw bunches of something. So anything in that they can think of, a bunches of something, they would draw it out. And then for dozens, they would do the same thing, draw a dozen of something. And, you know, some of them would start thinking like, oh, I know that there's a dozen of eggs my mom buys, or just bringing that real life into it. And then step 3, we would like have them use the phrase no more than, because like more than is addition, but you know, they can get confused that no more than is usually subtraction. So like we gave them an example and like bringing real world into it so that they can fully grasp the concept. So the student cannot have no more than 5 cookies a day, and then they would write their own sentence about that. And then just to make sure that they are like understanding these vocabularies, like whoever is like at the end of the group, like bringing in the exit ticket to make sure that they understood the vocabulary in some way. So like maybe writing or drawing your examples on an exit ticket, peer sharing to check for understanding, and get ready to read the problem at the end. And that was it. Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
I love the steps that you put in the beginning. To like kind of break up the problem and get them thinking about it more. It's like they're physically like drawing a dozen or something like that. I think that's great.
Yeah. I think, I mean, drawing in general, it's like for all the visual learners, which I think like a lot of students are visual learners, it really helps them.
I also like that you limited the vocabulary to only 3 terms. I feel like sometimes we overwhelm students with like a whole list of vocabulary. So being able to really limit that, I felt like that's a good number to keep it within.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like getting the vocabulary words that like, because like bunches, like I wouldn't have thought of grabbing bunches. You know, I think like we use bunches like so normally, but like that it could be a complicated term for our English learners sometimes.
Yeah, great.
I also wanted to say that I liked when you were talking about like then giving examples of like things they would buy in a dozen or things that come in a dozen, because I think it could open up a conversation, because you said like making like those real life connections, but even just like those like cultural connections of like
Yeah.
students, like I think of like because you know I come from like a Latino background, I gotta be like, oh yeah, my mom buys like a docena of tamales, like a docena equals a dozen, you know, so just making those like cultural connections and be like, oh, like this is what it means, like I know what that looks like, you know.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Well, great job, Daisy. We appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Do we have the person who's representing Group C that's ready to present?
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Cool. Can everyone see that? Okay, cool. So we were expert group C, and it was about building skills for language output, ELD standards, and written language. So for the standard, we chose engage in written exchanges with peers, and we kept it really simple. We just decided to make a Google slide for the presentation, and they're basically gonna walk through how they arrived for their solution for the florist problem. So this is the reflective phrase, so the closing of the lesson. So first, they will need a slide for the problem, their approach, a visual to explain their approach, and then their solution. So they're going to be working in small groups to create this slide. And then for our closing, we put for assessments, students will share their ideas in small groups on how they constructed their slides. Students will then present their slides to the class. Each student is required to present one portion of the slide, and then students will decide presenting order beforehand. So we basically used what we did for this presentation and kind of tailored it for our slide. And then teachers will observe the presentation and check to see If they understand the concept behind the florist problem, teacher will ensure that all required slides are present, and then teacher will ensure that all students presented at least one slide. So basically, yeah, that was it for our presentation.
Great job. I like the fact of having them use slides. I think that's really cool. Kids are so techy nowadays too. Like they love making like slides. So
Same, to add on to Sydney, like some of my kids are making like their own presentation slides in my class, and they get so into it. Like they want to add so many visuals. It's really cute.
I also just like the presenting kind of aspect to it, because I think it like holds students accountable, and just like the way that you broke it down, like each student has to present at least one of their slides. And I just think, like, you know, the saying that like the best way to learn is to teach something. So I think this will just reinforce the concepts to students as well.
Thank you.
I think too, the idea of allowing students to work together, right? So many times they feel paralyzed when they work alone, when they are like, I don't have a strategy for moving forward. So having a peer or a group to bounce ideas off of and coming to this creation together is really great. So appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Nice job. Okay, I think that takes us to group D, which I bet is Sydney.
okay, let me just share my screen. Can everybody see it? So we had provide varied structures, opportunities for using academic English and math. So ours is a little bit simpler just because we're providing a lot of ways that they can just include English in this math problem. So the florist task. So we started with definitely adding our talk moves and like having it, obviously we would want to have it also like posted somewhere in the room, but reminding them specifically to be kind and have purposeful discussions and things like that. And making sure that everybody learns from each other and it's okay to disagree, definitely to put that in there. It's okay to disagree or agree, and from disagreeing and agreeing, we can further get into the problem and see how to do it. And then remember, we are all learning as a team. So definitely starting with these talk moves. And then we posted the problem again. We'd all read it together as a class and give opportunity for any direct questions right here. And then we'd move on to our launch phase. So we posted pictures, different pictures of like a bunch and a dozen, so they could get different ideas of what it kind of looks like, not just from flowers, but from other items as well. But we started with talk to your partners about things you have seen in dozens. Talk with your partner about what we notice and what we wonder about our math problem. Start with, I noticed a dozen roses means, and I noticed a bunch means. So we're just kind of setting them up to be able to have this English discussion about this math problem and kind of get into kind of what they would notice and wonder about it, and like get them thinking deeper of like, oh, what might be like in the future, what might come up as a question. And then starting them off with, I noticed a dozen roses means, and I noticed a bunch means, just so they're for sure talking together about what those means, because that's definitely a big part of this problem. And if they don't know what those means, they're not going to be able to move on from the problem. I don't know why I keep saying program. And then during our solve phase, we're going to have them think, pair, share, and discuss as a class after. So we would say something like, talk with your partner about what you think about this math problem. Partner A, start with, I think the florist will order blank amount of flowers because blank. Then partner B will also share. Then partner B will state, I would start to solve this problem by, and partner A will go after. So now we're kind of setting them up for direct talk moves on how to kind of start going about this program. So again, like we separated them partner A and B to keep organization. And then partner A starts, I think this many and this many, partner B shares, And then they kind of go into, well, okay, I would solve this problem by this. And so again, we just set it up very clearly so they stay on task. And then at the end, we'll share as a class. So that's how we all come together as a class and really solve the problem together and share how everybody got their own kind of ideas. And then to conclude it, the reflecting phase, a partner, share with B partner. Talk to your partner about your answer and how you came up with the solution. So for specific things we said, I think the florist ordered blank roses and blank lilies because blank. I agree or disagree because blank. And then can you tell me more about your answer? So again, just kind of wrapping this up and giving a way to be able to talk that is set up for them so they kind of know where the conversation should be going, especially with this I disagree or agree, and then having a deeper discussion about it. So that's kind of our English that we would throw into this math problem. Why do I see program? Oh my goodness. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I like how your group had like structured conversations that they were like in partners too. Um, Especially I think I remember I want to say in our with Jennings, she was talking about how like working in partners like lowers their affective filter because it's just less stress for them. You know, and especially someone who like, let's say you have an emergent bilingual and then a standard English learner, they're able to like the standard English language learner can kind of like model language for them as well. Um, and then having those sentence starters, it gives them like just like a frame to like organize their ideas as well. Good
Yeah.
job.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely love the idea of a sentence starter and definitely picking your partner A and your partner B, especially with their younger kids to kind of keep them on track. It's like, okay, A needs to share first, then B, then you switch. Then you can kind of have a more general conversation about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I liked how structured your kind of thinking was, because it's so easily for like especially like the little ones to get lost when it's partner time to share. So like I really liked all that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, you guys.
Great job, everybody, with your presentations. I appreciate how you broke it up with that same task, looking at inputs, looking at output, and looking at all phases of the lesson, how you can infuse it and make it better for emergent bilinguals, but I would also argue better for all students in the classroom. So yay, applause, very great job. I'm going to go ahead and close the breakout room. So in the next minute, everyone's going to start coming back in. So maybe what you want to do is start thinking about that question. What is an important thing you plan to do in your math lesson to help your emergent bilinguals be powerful in math? And you talked about several different things. So be thinking of one that you can add to the chat. Everybody's starting to file back in. That was the 1 minute warning. So all the breakout rooms are coming back in. Hopefully you had enough time to present and have some conversations in your classroom. What I'd like everybody to do is now go to the chat, and you'll see I posted in the chat, but also I'll tell you what your prompt is going to be. What is an important thing you plan to do in your math lessons to help your emergent bilinguals be powerful in math? So think about that. I know in all of your presentations, you thought about different strategies you could do, different techniques. So just think about one and go ahead and add that to the chat when you're ready. I'm seeing the chat blow up here. I love it. So it looks like a lot of you are talking about using visuals, using those sentence frames to help with the conversations, with discussions, breaking down vocabulary. Yes, love that. Many of you highlighted different things that were asked in the florist task and then explain those and used visuals as well. Using talk moves. I'm seeing that came up several times. Again, the sentence frames, showing images or dialogue examples. So what a conversation might look like between partner A and partner B. All really good things. How do we decode word problems? So what are we looking for? How we read through it. Also that 3 read strategy. If you remember, we kind of looked at that in week 9 as well. So great. Kind of just looking through to see if there's anything that I missed. Oh, manipulatives. Yes. Always great if we can bring in tangible objects with our students as well. That helps. And previewing the lesson ahead of time in their home language. Dakota, I see you just threw that in there. Really great idea, right? So if that's something where you are bilingual or multilingual, or you have students in the classroom, that's a helpful technique as well. So great job on that. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for this because we're going to move into our next phase here.